In our village, we put some water in the summer, we put water in the pot, and it stays cold no matter how hot it gets. And this may be a commentary on the ability of the human being. Unlike the jinn that's made of fire, so they get inflamed easily, human beings can be in very tough situations and still maintain their cool. They have the ability to have sabr. That may be an implication of the word fakhar. Like it may be a commentary on our internal ability. That when we do fill ourselves with iman, by the way, iman and revelation are compared to water in the Quran. Subhanallah. So if the pot is filled with water, it can stay cool, right? It can calm you from the inside. Even if the outside's scorching hot and boiling, it stays cool on the inside. That was really beautiful.
Rahman.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد everyone Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh once again. Folks in the back, you guys can continue to make noise, but if I hear children, I'm coming after you myself. Okay, so they're singing. Okay, anyway. خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ كَالْفَخَّارِ Allah will now, two ayat, 14 and 15, Allah will mention the human being, then He will mention the jinn. The important thing, the first interesting, curious thing to note here is Allah already mentioned both of you. The question that was asked, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ Then which other wonderful acts of God, of your master, both of you, are you both going to be undermining? That question already referred to two. But Allah didn't say who those two are yet. And now He's saying it. So the expectation was first He'll say jinns and humans, then He will mention two. Right? Because if you just say you two without any context, then how are you supposed to know who the you two is referring to? To understand the answer to that question, there's been a few theories that you can find in tafsir literature. I'm not going to be sharing all of them with you because I didn't find them all that convincing. What I did find convincing is Amin Ahsan Islahi's approach to this question, and so I'm going to share with you what I found the most convincing. Okay? That doesn't mean it's the right answer, it's just what settles the most with me. This surah is addressing two groups. According to the ayah of Surah Al-Ra'd, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ شَيَاطِينَ الْإِنسِ عَدُوًّا شَيَاطِينَ الْجِنِّ وَإِنسِ وَالْجِنِّ يُوحِي بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ غُرُورًا That Allah says that He put enemies for every prophet that were devils of jinns and human beings that inspire each other, that motivate each other. So what that tells us is, in the context of the Prophet ﷺ, the Quraysh are his enemies. And they keep coming up with the most vile kinds of insults and attacks and undermining him and trying to even torture Sahaba at one point. All of that's happening, that they're doing that. But actually behind them is an invisible army of devils that are inspiring them to do that. And when they see, when the devils see that one of them, like Abu Lahab is being Abu Lahab, he's doing some Abu Lahab business, then the shayateen say, wow, that worked, let's take the next step. So Abu Lahab got inspired by the devil, then the devil saw Abu Lahab act and got inspired to do even something worse and incite them to something worse. So they're actually inspiring each other. They're creating a negative, a spiral of evil, right? A downward spiral. And this is a design that Allah made as a challenge for all prophets. And especially if Allah's Messenger ﷺ is the greatest prophet, then He's going to have the greatest opponents, right? So that's the process that's going on. Now, there's the seen enemy and the unseen enemy. The seen enemy is the Quraysh, and the unseen enemy is the jinns, the minions of the devil that are doing this work. So in the middle of all of that, what Allah does is He calls both of them out in the word tukadhiban, and the jinn are listening, We know that the jinn are passively listening. So even when they're listening, even the Quraysh must be wondering, the kafir must be wondering, who's both of you? And then the jinn might be wondering, did he just say both of you? Who's both of you? And then in the next two ayat, Allah mentions the human being and then He mentions the jinn as if to tell the jinn, by the way, I see you. You may be invisible to everyone else, that doesn't mean you're invisible to me. And so He first creates the mystery and then solves the mystery Himself and calls them out. But the way He calls them out is really profound. So we're going to learn something about, when Allah talks about creating the human being, which He already has, the second ayah or the third ayah of the surah was خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانِ. We're seeing an echo of what the surah started with, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانِ again. We're seeing it repeated now. So that's important to note. But now we're learning something else. We're seeing an additional detail that fits in this context. And what's that? مِن صَلْصَالٍ كَالْفَخَّارِ. From dried up, crackling dirt like the clay pot. This picture was a good depiction of the kind of thing salsal is. Okay? So if you want to visualize what salsal is, that picture would help you. I mean, we're going to look at the dictionary meaning, but that's essentially the idea, and we'll dig a little deeper. وَالْمُرَادُ بِالْإِنسَانِ آدَمْ هُوَ أَصْلُ الْجِنْس. Meaning, Allah created Adam alayhi salam from this. And by saying He created Adam from this, then all of us by extension are created from this. But He's originally talking about Adam alayhi salam. الصلصال الطين اليابس الذي يصل من يبسه. The يصل من يبسه, the dry kind of sand or dirt that makes noise, like a crackling noise. So when you walk on it, you get crunchy sounds, right? That's the kind of dirt that would be طين يابس or salsal. صل اللحم, they use when meat has sal, like the word salsal, it's when it's gone bad and it starts smelling bad. Like you didn't cook it or you left it and it's gone bad and it stinks. That's actually called sal. The idea is the clay, the mud, has gone through so many processes that it has a terrible smell also on top of that. It's reached the point of sal. This is the same way when water goes bad, they call it sulsula. Sulsula. Like if you left water at the bottom of the pot and it starts going bad and it has a bad smell, that water is called sulsula. This word is also used for sharp and unpleasant sounds of animals, like a donkey making a loud, ugly sound. That's actually al-had as-sawt, sal. So these are the meanings, and what that combines into is the kind of dirt that makes loud sounds. Now, why is that important to note? We'll get to the analogy in a second. It's important to note because stuff doesn't grow on this kind of dirt. It cannot absorb water. So if you look at the passage so far, Allah described the fertile earth, didn't He? Right? So habitats where every creature can eat. And then He described fruits that grow. Obviously, you need fertile land for fruits to grow. Then He described crop, وَالْحَبُّ ذُو الْعَصْفِ وَالرَّيْحَانِ, soft dirt that accepts nutrients, that has nutrients in it, that takes water in. And then all of a sudden we're getting this picture, which is like the opposite of life. Lifeless, useless dirt. And then He compares it, كَالْفَخَّارِ, like pots, like the pot. Like, the clay pot. That's what He's saying, al-fakhar here. There's a common confusion in some English translations. They take the word fakhar like qassas and khabbaz and khayyat. These are Arabic forms to describe people in a certain profession. So they say, oh, this is the potter, the guy who makes the pottery. It's not. The word fakhar may take that shape, but in Arabic usage, that's not what it means. It actually refers to the pot itself. Okay? So He's describing this clay, and then He makes the analogy with the pot. Okay. Ibn Atiyah's summary of the comment here, I won't read all of the Arabic. The summary of his point is perhaps Allah is honoring the human being by using this word because He's comparing it to a beautiful thing that's been made. Like pots and pans and those kinds of things were actually put on display and they added to the beauty of the home. So perhaps that human beings have been molded and crafted, because pottery is art, isn't it? And you have to have a certain skill to make it symmetrical, so that maybe that's actually kind of a compliment to human beings. That's his view. I'm not entirely sold on the view, because I'll tell you in a second why. Al-Fakhir, so Allah says He made human beings from dried up dirt, that make sounds just like the pot. Al-fakhir min al-busr, but the word pot actually comes from the word fakhr. And anybody know what fakhr means? Even the non-Arabs here might know. Pride, arrogance, right? That's fakhr, right? Fakhr actually, in its origin, has to do with hay that has no seed in it. Okay? If you have like crop and there's no seed, basically it's only good for animals, it's not good for anything else, right? That's called al-fakhir. Fakhur is a camel that has large udders but not a lot of milk. So it has large, so all show but no game, you know. That's no substance. So it's actually lack of substance. Similarly, fakhar is used for pots that are empty, like they're really big pots, but there's nothing inside. They're hollow on the inside. So actually the theme inside the origin of this word is something that lacks substance. It's empty or hollow on the inside, or it doesn't have what you think it might have. And from it, you get the idea of a person who's fakhur. A person who's fakhur is someone who's very inflated, but there's not a lot going on inside. What's also really interesting about the pot is that it's very loud when it's empty, right? And the more you fill it, the less sound it makes, right? And you'll find that in people too. The ones that are the emptiest inside are the loudest, right? And they have something to say about everything. And when people are filled and they're more quiet, they don't feel the need to comment on everything, right? So there's a really interesting comparison being made between fakhar and human beings. وَالَّذِي يَظْهَرْ لِي أَنْ يَكُونَ الْفَخَّارِ حَالًا مِنَ الْإِنسَانِ. This is Ibn Ashur saying, what seems to be the case to me, he says, is that this is a state of the human being. Like that we were made in a certain special kind of way. Perhaps it's referring to the way we were molded, but it's perhaps also referring to the idea that we seem to get really inflated while we're empty on the inside. And that may be a commentary on the takdhib, the denial of all of Allah's favors, that's where it comes from. Interestingly, another word that's similar to this that was used in Surah An-Najm was وَأَنْتُمْ سَامِدُونَ. وَأَنْتُمْ سَامِدُونَ, towards the end. It's an interesting, unique word. It's not very commonly used in the Quran. Samid is someone who is used for an animal that puffs up their chest to scare or intimidate their opponent. So to make themselves look bigger. And Samid is also used for someone who fills their chest with air before they start singing out loud and dancing. And so it was used for people that are posturing and trying to impress and trying to sing and dance or whatever. Like in high school, there's always some kids that are just obnoxious and try to be extra loud. And like if the teacher calls them out, they wait a little bit and then they say, I don't care. Like they could just say, I don't care, but they have to like really do the samid thing, right? That's similar to the word al-fakhar. So it's as if Allah is now, by comparing the nutritious soil to this clay soil that is basically dried up and useless, and then he describes the human being made as fakhar. The thing with soil is the soil produces crop, and when the crop is done, can you reuse the soil? Yeah, you could totally reuse the soil. But if you break the pot, can you reuse the pot? The clay? No, it's useless now. It's useless. Why do you think you're so useful? Your usefulness on this earth is temporary. Your existence on this earth is temporary. And the only purpose you exist, the pot, the only purpose it exists is to be filled with something. Because if you're not filled with something, you're pointless. You're just for show. There's nothing else to you. It's such a profound commentary on the human condition. وَذَلِكَ أَنَّ التُّرَابِ الَّذِي مِنْ شَأْنِهِ التَّفَتُّتْ إِذَا صَارَ بِحَيْثُ يُجْعَلُ طَرْفَ الْمَاءِ وَالْمَائِعَاتِ وَلَا يَتَفَتَّتْ وَلَا يَنْقَعْ فَكَأَنَّهُ يَفْخَرُ عَلَى أَفْرَادِ جِنْسِهِ. Really interesting comment by Razi. He tried to figure out why is the pot called fakhar from pride. What does pride have to do with a pot? And he says, well, because soil, water goes right through it. But you take that same soil and mud and you put it through a process and it becomes a pot. And now it can hold water within it. And all of a sudden this pot is now is full of pride. Because look what I became. which is also a really interesting commentary on human beings, right? Because we were nothing, and then we become this thing, and then all of a sudden we're like, yeah, we get full of ourselves. الطين الطيب إذا مسه الماء فخر أي ربا وعظمة. Similar idea by Ibn Atiyah. Now, there's some names on the screen here. I'm just going to tell you a little story about these people. I went to Pakistan recently. I just spent about 3 weeks there. I was teaching a course there. And I decided to expand and do some experiments with Muslim students around the world. So there's a wonderful institution in Pakistan called the International Islamic University of Islamabad, similar to the International Islamic University in Malaysia, in Gombak. So my seminar was being attended by a bunch of students from there also. And I just said, if there's any students here that have background in Islamic studies, they've graduated in Usuluddin, Tafsir, etc., that would like to work with me on tafsir work, right? Because I'm working on these surahs, like I'm working on Surah Rahman right now, then Waqi'ah and others, and they'd like to assist me and do some homework with me, then let me know. And so in just one seminar, like 50 of them applied. And I had a group of friends that were helping me, so they kind of engaged some interview process, and we selected a few candidates, and then I started meeting with them. And the National Incubation Center was very kind enough to let us use their space to work with them. So I worked with these students. There's about 9 females and 2 males, and they are brilliant. They're all brilliant, mashallah. Like their Arabic, their ability to grasp the material, study the tafasir. We did a lot of work on Surah Rahman together, actually. Before I got here, we were kind of working 6 to 8 hours a day at the incubation center with the team. Was working on different parts of the surah and the words and the analysis. What you're seeing on the screen is like a 10% version of all the notes that we put together, right? Each of them put together. But then what I do now, I have 2 calls every day before these lectures. I have my own study for 7 or 8 hours every day. But outside of that, I have 2 calls. I have one call with Sheikh Suhaib Saeed, and I have one call with some of those students. And just to get their thoughts on the ayat of the day. Because they've been doing the research with me. Okay, so what are your tadabbur on these ayat, right? So today, 3 of them had some interesting thoughts, so I'm going to share them with you, right? So in addition. So the first thought is my own. The contrast between the human being has been given, between what the human being has been given and his origin. Meaning Allah has really entitled us a lot in the surah. From Allama al-Quran to Allamahu al-Bayan to the order of the cosmos to the facilities on this earth. And then immediately he takes us to, by the way, you were made from the most useless kind of dirt on this planet. And much like pottery is made. It's not made from expensive materials. That's why you can find pottery in the poorest villages. You can find pottery. You may not find glass there. You may not find a lot of metal or jewelry there, but you can find pottery in any village in the world because the source material is the cheapest possible material. So Samra had a thought. She said the human being is like a showpiece until put to use. Like pots that are sitting there empty until you put them to use. There's, what are you there for except for show? So you're just there for fakhr. And Zayd added something that was really cool because he's from a village in Pakistan. So he said, in our village, we put some water in the summer. We put water in the pot, and it stays cold no matter how hot it gets. And this may be a commentary on the ability of the human being. Unlike the jinn that's made of fire, so they get inflamed easily, human beings can be in very tough situations and still maintain their cool. They have the ability to have sabr. That may be an implication of the word fakhr. Like it may be a commentary on our internal ability. That when we do fill ourselves with iman, by the way, iman and revelation are compared to water in the Quran. Subhanallah. So if the pot is filled with water, it can stay cool, right? It can calm you from the inside. Even if the outside's scorching hot and boiling, it stays cool on the inside. That was really beautiful. And then from the context of the surah, Sabiha asked the question, and it gave me the thought that, how we're talking about the entire surah, that it's talking about the worst of the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ? And perhaps through using this word, Allah is saying, well, your source problem seems to be your pride. And your source problem seems to be you don't recognize your origin. Right? So, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ كَالْفَخَّارِ. Now we get to the jinn. وخلق الجان من مارج من نار. Some comments. هو أبو الجن كما أن الإنسان المذكور هنا هو أبو الإنس. So first thought that people had about this ayah is when human beings were created from dirt, that must refer to Adam, because he was literally made from dirt. Well, that must mean that Jan here refers to the father of all jinns. Okay, so just like the father of all humans, Adam, this must be a reference to the father of all jinns, Al-Jan. That's what Imam Razi and others have also said. The question is that Iblis? Right? That's an interesting question, but it's a nobody cares question. Because when Allah doesn't tell us something, that's because it's not relevant for you, so don't worry about it. Is Iblis the father of all jinns? Personally, I'm inclined to say no, because there were other jinns already there. There were already jinns there. And the other interesting thing, because Allah will mention in Surah Al-Jinn that the jinns say that the fool among us says ridiculous things. Who are they referring to, the fool among us? Is Iblis. They don't say our dad is crazy. They say the fool among us says ridiculous things, right? So he may well not be the original jinn. He's one of the jinn, right? But this may be referring to the original that was created. هو الجن بنفسه فالجان والجن وصفان من باب واحد كما يقال ملح ومالح. So jinn, when you use the word jinn, you're referring to the species. Okay? When you're saying jan, you're referring to the quality. Someone who has jinn qualities, meaning one jinn. So jan is not the reference to the entire species, it's referring to one. That's the point that's being made here by Imam Razi. Okay? This is the same thing, Abuhum and Abuna. Now, let's talk about how the jinns were made. Allah says, min marijim min nar. Lots of Arabic notes here. I'll give you the summary. Maraj means two things. It means release. It means to release, irsal. It also means to mix something together. So when something is mixed together, it's called marij. Like amrun marij, two things mixed with each other. Marij min nar means, of course there's fire and then there's the fuel of the fire, right? Marriage means some kind of mixture that has fire in it and has some fuel in it. The fuel has not been mentioned what that is, but those two merge together and become one, and they are made of some kind of fire. Interestingly, the word nar is also nakira, which means some kind of fire. All of this boils down to the following. Some say that marriage means it has smoke. Others say it doesn't have smoke because it's mixed together. Others say this is the spark of the fire. Others say this is the invisible part of the fire, which I'm inclined to believe, that it mixes with its material until it becomes invisible. One of our team members is actually a scientist, a chemistry major, and she told us that in lab sometimes there are different kinds of fires. There are fires that don't have high temperatures. You can put your hand in it and nothing happens, because chem majors are weird, they do that kind of stuff. There are fires that are entirely invisible but very dangerous. Your lab could be on fire and you don't see it and you don't even know, and you could die. Right? So there are different kinds of fires. Fires are not all, they don't look the same, they don't have the same combustion, they don't have the same temperature, they don't have the same appearance to the naked eye. And so when Allah says narin, it's actually some kind of fire that we're not familiar with, because it's made with some kind of mixed material that we're also not familiar with. He didn't tell us. But He did tell us it's some kind of thing that eventually just becomes fire itself. Some kind of fire itself. So we shouldn't think that jinns are made of the fire that we see. Because if that was the case, then the language here would have been وَخَلَقَ الْجَانَّ مِن مَارِجٍ مِنَ النَّارِ. There would have been an alif lam on nar. The fact that there's no alif lam there, it means naw'un min nar, like some kind of fire. Maybe perhaps some kind of fire that you're not familiar with, right? And so we try to kind of cage, don't do a barbecue because jinns, because fire. Like, no, you can do a barbecue. That's annar allati turun. That's the fire you made. That's not the jinn fire. It's some other thing that Allah created. And where that was it made on earth? Was it made somewhere else? Allah doesn't say, right? So, وَجُعِلَ الْإِنسَانِ أَفْضَلْ مِنَ الْجَانِ فَإِذَا نَظَرَ إِلَى أَصْلِهِ عَلِمَ مَا أَنَّهُ مَا نَالَ الشَّرَفِ إِلَّا بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. It's the question Razi asks, because Imam Razi loves that. He asks questions. Where he says, when I read this ayah, here are the questions that come in my mind. And then he tries to answer that question. So he asked the question, why even mention the jinn? The surah is about the favors done to human beings, right? They're still kind of hung up on the word favor, aren't they? Because that's the dominant view. And I've already explained, what does ala mean? What does ala mean? Wonders. Wonders, right? So now, but regardless, we can understand here, because the focus is on uniquely wondrous things done to benefit human beings, that the flavor is that of favors. Then Allah is comparing, just like He compared us to animals, and we see that how much we've been favored. The same way now by describing how the jinns are made of fire, and we're made of something that is cool and constructive, as opposed to them being made of fire, which is destructive. We are made of something that has nutrients in it. We're made of something that produces life. We're made of something that connects us to the earth, and therefore the nourishment comes from dirt, just like we are from dirt. The qualities of the earth become our qualities, right? It has the capacity to hold within it great potential. The earth can produce a variety of vegetation. A variety of things can come out of the earth. A variety of life can be sustained on the earth. Human beings are capable of varieties of skills, varieties of production. The human mind can do incredible things. Physically, we can do different things. We're all very different. We have so much variety. All of that comes from what? The fact that we are from dirt. And the jinns are made of something. The best thing that it can be used for is destruction, to burn something down. What's also interesting is the jinn are made of fire that cannot destroy human beings, because when you put fire to dirt, it makes clay that can be used for pottery and build something. So they can, even if the shayateen are attacking someone and the heat is coming on us, if we understand our purpose correctly, instead of destroying us, it only hardens us and makes us tougher, right? So we've been given this incredible advantage over the fire. And by the way, one of the coolest ways to put out a fire is what? No, not just water. Dirt. Dirt can put out fire, because dirt is not combustible, right? So we've been given kind of a rock, paper, scissors advantage over the fire, right? So again, an advantage to human beings has been described in وَخَلَقَ الْجَانَّ مِن مَارِجٍ مِّن نَارٍ. خلق من نار خالصة أو مختلطة على تفسيرين فيه ابتدائية فالتنكير لأنه أريد نار مخصوصة. This is the point I've already made to you. It's a special kind of fire that is different from the fires that we know. There are some people in the late 1800s, mid 1800s, Muslims, that became so impressed with the Industrial Revolution that was happening in Europe, which was a result of scientific exploration, that they decided that Muslims need to rethink the entire Quran on scientific terms. So then interpretations came out of the Quran, even in the 1800s, that were suggesting that jinns are just really hot-tempered people. Like they're not some separate creation from fire, they're just really hot-tempered people, right? And angels are just really nice people. That's what angels are. So they wanted to kind of scientifically explain everything in the Quran, right? And the problem with that is you can do that only if you're not loyal to the language. Because the language of the Quran is very clear. So Alusi even says here, because he's later in that time and he's experiencing some of this stuff. So he says, وَفِي الْآيَةِ رَدٌّ عَلَى مَنْ يَزْعُمْ أَنَّ الْجِنُّ نُفُوسٌ مُجَرَّدَةٌ. And this ayah, by the way, is a pretty clear answer for anybody who thinks that jinns are actual people, like human people. They're not. So stop messing with the Quran. So this tendency to try to bend the Quran to our cultural or our social expectations, right? This tendency was there, and the tendency still exists. We still try to do that sometimes with the Quran. Another student of mine, Maria, she made an observation about these two, the dirt and the fire, which are pure substances. They're original substances. So we've been both species have actually been created from something pure. And so it's almost as if Allah is telling them, you've been created from pure sources. Why do you incline towards impurity? Why do you go towards impurity if you've been made from a pure source? So I thought that was a valuable insight. Now again we're being asked the question, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Then which wonders? Meaning, what is Allah making me focus on now? Previously it was 7 things and then He made me focus. Now He's making me focus on my origin. And He's making me focus on the origin of the jinn. And how compared to that, I've been given such an advantage. Am I still going to deny His wonders? Then what other ala are you going to be in denial of? Do you still want, it's as if the ayah is saying, you still want more? You're still not satisfied? And then the ayat move on. Rabbul Mashriqayni wa Rabbul Maghribayn. This is where things are going to get a little bit, I don't know how else to describe it, psychedelic. There are 2 worlds, the world of jinn and the world of human beings. The jinns are not limited to this planet. So when I say east and west, what does that refer to? Sunrise and sunset. That's what east and west refers to. But if you're not on this planet, if you have access to beyond this planet, you're chilling on Mars, east and west is a different thing, yes or no? Yeah, and if you can go even beyond this solar system, is east and west a different thing then? So my east and west is restricted to the sun and the moon, which is mentioned in the beginning, ash-shamsu wal-qamaru bi-husban. That's where my definition of east and west comes from. But the angels' definition of east and west, or the jinn's definition of east and west, cannot be limited to my definition of east and west. Because that is their landscape. What is their real estate? And what is the east of their real estate and the west of their real estate is not like mine. So perhaps one of the things Allah is saying when He says He's the master of both easts and the master of both wests is perhaps the master of the east and west of humans and the other east and west of the jinns. Like they have their own east and west and perhaps He's their master too. Another implication of this at the same time is that if you're familiar with the concept of the summer solstice, the sun, to make it super simple, if a farmer has a home and when he wakes up after Fajr, he sees the sun rise from the window, right? 6 months later, the sun is going to rise from the second window. The sun doesn't rise from the exact same place. Over the course of half a year, it moves. And then over the next 6 months, it moves back where it started. This is called the summer solstice. So over the course of the year, how many easts do you get? 2. And over the course of the year, then on the flip side, how many wests do you get? 2. Right? So this is why Rabbu Mashriqay ash-shams sayfan wa shita'an wa maghribayha, the 2 easts of the summer and the winter, and the 2 wests of the summer and the winter. Which is really cool because now by this phrase, Allah has connected, Allah is the Rabb of each of them differently. Like what He expects from humans is different, what He expects from jinns is different. So the word Rabb is repeated twice also, maybe even indicating that. Like the expectations are different because what He created, when He created the human beings, He gave a set of expectations to them. When He created the jinn, He has a different set of expectations from them. Not the same as what He has from us. Similarly, what we saw earlier on was a reference to fruits and crop and farm, right? And that has a lot to do with the seasons. And by saying 2 easts and 2 wests, we're not just talking about the sun and the night and the day. We're now encompassing the seasons too. So it ties in with what was being talked about before. Rabbul Mashriqayni wa Rabbul Maghribayni. So another reading of this ayah, by the way, is Rabbil Mashriqayni wa Rabbil Maghribayni with a kasra. You know what that would do? فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ رَبِّ الْمَشْرِقَيْنِ وَرَبِّ الْمَغْرِبَيْنِ. It would tie to the ayah, how many more favors and how many more wonders, divine acts of the Rabb of both easts and the Rabb of both wests will you be in denial of? So it's actually connecting to that ayah. If you read it, Rabbi, right? So it would tie into that. That would be ayah number 17. Now again, this question, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Now, this time, what does Allah want me to ponder as one of His divine miracles? Seasons. And what a gift of Allah it is that their world, their east and west, is not my east and west. Can you imagine if I had to deal with jinns, like having to see them and meet with them and hang out with them and all that stuff? Is there some interaction between humans and jinns? Yes. There is some interaction between them. Of course, I read the ayah to you. They inspire each other. We read Surah An-Nas, they would do whispers in the chests of people. الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. So we know that happens. We know Sulaiman alayhi salam controlled the jinn. So is there interaction between them? Yes. But for the most part, is there a barrier between the two for the most part? Yeah, imagine if there was zero barrier, right? That itself is a wonder from Allah. Two magnificent, heavy species that coexist, and for the most part, Allah has created a barrier between them. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Speaking of barriers, Allah says, مَرَجَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ. He unleashed two seas that clash against each other. This ayah, I'm just telling you, I'm going to tell you what I think it means after whatever I studied, but I'm going to be very honest with you, I don't know fully what it means. I don't know yet fully what it means, but I'll tell you what I think so far based on the readings that I've done. One reading of this is, salt water and fresh water. They merge with each other and they don't mix together. This is a picture, by the way. If you can see what's going on, there's two different kinds of water and they're not mixing with each other. This is in Brazil. It's called the Two Waters. Okay, so you can look it up or go there on vacation if you want. But that's the place. Okay. I'm pretty sure though that the Quran's not talking about Brazil. Call me crazy, but I think that's not the subject. Okay. Now, what could this be talking about? One place the mind goes is actually as the earth was being formed. This was a large mass of water, and there were massive floods in the history of the world. And then the waters receded, and what was under the water was these large land masses. So what used to be one body of water became two, for example, and separated by continents, separated by land masses, right? So if you actually look at geological history of the world, there were great floods in which actually there were some places that existed in the world that no longer exist, they're underwater. And there are some places that were always underwater and now they're above water because the water has receded, right? So perhaps Allah is saying that at some point the two seas were actually clashing with each other, and then in the next ayah He's going to say He put a barrier between them that they don't cross, meaning land emerged between them. That may be one way to look at what the ayah is talking about. بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ. Interestingly, that is something that others have also talked about. Now the word maraj is also really important and interesting. Maraja is used, we just saw marijim min nar, right? As one of the cool things in this surah is the same kind of word will be used with totally different meanings. Mizan, 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 different meaning, right? Then maraj, marriage, right? And then soon marjan, yakhruju minhu lu'lu' wal, all three different meanings, similar word but different meanings. So maraja has to do with mixing. So one translation could be He mixed the two seas together as they clash against each other or smash against each other. Yaltaqiyan. Iltiqa is used for forces that crash against each other. Another possible meaning of maraja is irsal, to release, to let go, which is similar to, you remember when I said He made the sky high? He didn't, it would be wrong to think He raised the sky. The idea is Allah left the sky, or He allowed the sky to be unleashed. And it's similar language being used here. He allowed the seas to be vast, crashing against each other. يَلْتَقِيَانِ. Marijatil uhud, when things become confused in state because they're fused together. And so maraja is used for also when people aren't sure, did the contract say this or did it say that? And that becomes an amr marij for them. But here, the word Bahrain, this is also an interesting observation. Bahr is typically translated as the sea. You can even translate it as the ocean. You can do that. However, Bahr can be used for any large body of water in classical Arabic. So in modern Arabic, Bahr only refers to the ocean or the sea. But Bahr can also be used for smaller bodies of water if they resemble to the naked eye larger bodies. Okay? So this is why يشبه ذا الماء الملح في السعة وكثرة الماء. So if it looks like the sea, but it's not quite the sea. So if somebody was standing at Lake Michigan, for example, they could get away with calling it Bahr in classical Arabic because it's that large, right? So that can be the case. But if you're at some pond in your park, then you're probably not going to call that a Bahr, okay? Now, why is that important? Because then it may not be talking about two seas colliding or two oceans colliding. It might even be referring to rivers falling into seas, bays merging into seas, right? There could be some other smaller versus larger bodies of water that come together, like waterfalls pouring into seas, right? So مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ. By the way, before we go on, I told you I don't quite know what this means. Because Allah just mentioned two dimensions of reality, the jinn world and the human world. Some actually looked at this ayah and said, perhaps there's a sea that the jinns have, and there's a sea that the humans have. And there's the water on this planet, and there's some other body of water somewhere in the heavens also, right, that we don't know about. Now there might be some weight to that. That sounds a little wild, but this is found in Qurtubi. You know, بحر السماء وبحر الأرض. He's actually said the ocean in the sky and the ocean on earth. This came from the notion that the arsh of Allah is above water. كان عرشه على الماء. It's in the Quran that arsh of Allah is on water, right? So there is some reference to water up in the universe somewhere. Then maybe that's what it's a reference to. If they have their own east and they have their own west, then maybe they have their own sea too. And so maybe the world of the jinn and the world of the human beings collide with each other. Is a symbolic way of saying it. It's a symbolic way of saying it, subhanAllah. You know, that the world of the jinn and the world of human beings collide. By the way, it's interesting that this kind of language is used in Surah Al-Kahf. You remember when Musa alayhi salam met this mysterious person? You know where he met him? It's called Majma' al-Bahrain. The gathering place of two seas or two oceans, right? And if you study tafsir of that ayah, there's a lot of really interesting commentary there also, because Musa alayhi salam represents the wahi given to prophets. And Khadir represents the wahi given to non-prophets. Mysterious creatures that have their own instructions that don't follow the wahi given to prophets. In the wahi given to prophets, you're not supposed to kill anybody that's innocent. But in the wahi given to Khadir, does he kill a child? Yeah, he does. In the wahi given to in the sharia given to prophets, you're not supposed to damage somebody's property. And the wahi given to Khadir, he damages a ship, right? In wahi given to human beings through prophets, the means don't justify the ends, right? You can't just, or the ends don't justify the means. You can't say, oh, I was trying to do something good, that's why I'm doing his parents a favor, I killed him. You can't do that in sharia. You can't say the ends justify the means. But in the sharia, the wahi given to Khadir, do the ends justify the means? Yeah, they do. It's a different system. It's like interestingly, they met in a place where two seas meet, right? And they both represent two different seas of knowledge of Allah that aren't actually supposed to meet. And even when Musa alayhi salam got a little taste of that sea, he couldn't digest it. He couldn't take it. Like, imagine like creatures that are meant to be in certain kinds of water, and you put them in the other water, they can't live in that kind of water, right? So that imagery is also Majma' al-Bahrain, isn't it? And here he says he brought two seas and he clashed them together. Now, is there some interaction between the two seas? Yeah. Is there interaction between human beings and jinn? Yeah, but by and large, what has Allah done? Maraj al-Bahraini, and by the way, yaltaqiyan means crashing. And iltiqa is used when armies crash against each other. That's what it's used for. And he says, بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ. Barzakh is actually مَعْبَرْ بَاطِنِ جَوْفِ مِنْ خِلَالِ حَاجِزْ بَيْنَ أَشْيَاء. It's something that is internal or hidden away that creates a barrier between two sides. It can be any kind of separator. Some say it's internal. Others say that it's exposed. But that's basically what barzakh means, a barrier. A good English translation of barzakh is barrier. Okay? Some kind of separator. So Allah created a separation between the world of jinn and the oceans of the jinn and the oceans of human beings. Or physically the oceans of the Pacific coast and the Atlantic. Or two different bodies of water, which I think is the least likely, crashing into each other and not mixing. You can find pictures of that here and there. But by and large, I think this has a larger meaning. And that لا يبغيان means they don't violate it. تشبيه بليغ كل ماء منهما خصائص تدفع عن اختلاط الآخر به. One kind of water has its own life. One kind of water has its own temperature. If you go to South Africa, if you go to Cape Town, you'll see two ocean temperatures on the same coast. Two bodies of water are meeting, two different marine lives, two different temperatures of water, but they're right next to each other. Bahrain could also be referring to the currents of the ocean, because there's a marine biologist will tell you there's the upper ocean and there's the deeper ocean, and they don't mix with each other. The species and the water quality and even the movement of the water underneath is different from the water above, and the two don't mix with each other. So that could also be a reference to the two seas that don't meet with each other. وَقَدْ يَكُونْ بَيْنَهُمَا حَاجِزْ أَرْضِ مَحْسُوسٌ وَقَدْ لَا يَكُونْ. It could be there's a barrier between them that can be felt and seen, or cannot be. This may be a reference also to like Arabia. Like they have seas on either end, right? And in between they're the barzakh, right? And by the way, the more you get closer to the seas, you get closer to larger civilizations. Because how do nations become superpowers? When they have access to the waters, right? The nations that are landlocked are always in trouble. The nations that have access to the sea and access to the oceans, they're the nations that become superpowers, right? So for example, Afghanistan's biggest problem is that it's landlocked. So it's stuck on all sides between multiple powers, right? There are nations that are, Turkey ends up in trouble all the time because of the Suez Canal. It's got access to the water. When that contract runs out, there's going to be a problem for Europe because they're going to have to pay extra tariffs to Turkey. So, there's not a surprise that Turkey keeps having all kinds of instability and all kinds of stuff happening because there's powers at play, and those powers have a lot to do with the passage of the seas. When great world wars happened in the world, if you study where nations failed, is where they couldn't pass through certain seaports, and where empires couldn't expand when they got to a choke point in the waters where they could be attacked easily. So actually, the barzakh that doesn't get crossed is actually a pretty big deal. Now, what does that mean even for the Arabian region? The Arabs were living in this desert land. On different sides, there are different large empires that are not interested in fighting the Arabs. Why? Because there's no sea to be gained. And there's no treasure to be gained because they don't have oil yet. Right? So it's not an issue yet. So nobody's interested in taking over this barren desert. What did it allow the Arabs to do? It allowed the Arabs to go towards Yemen and do business and trade with, and by sea connect to all of Africa. All the way, even Asia, and then come back, go towards Syria, and from there, when they get to the coast, they can connect to all of Europe, they can connect to the other continents, and they are they're the barzakh in between that gets to benefit from the import-export of both of those worlds. They're the kind of this barrier between the East and the West. That's what they became. And they were Makkans particularly, because they were the midpoint. They were the beneficiaries of that trade. So there was they served as a barzakh that neither power could cross. And they don't have an army. They live in basically nothing compared to the Roman Empire, compared to the Persian Empire. What do they have? They have no resources, no military. There's just a bunch of tribes, mud homes. And yet, because they're a barzakh, nobody crosses over. Right? So بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ. Maybe an undertone of that. This is Al-Qurtubi, again, some really interesting comments. He says, barzakh is between the sky and the earth, meaning perhaps the seas is an allegorical reference to the seen world and the unseen world. And between them, Allah put a barzakh. Interestingly, our travel into the next life, right, there's a barrier stage, then we get into the next life. What's that barrier stage called? Also called barzakh. Al-arḍ allati baynahuma wa hiya al-hijaz. Meaning what I was telling you, the seas, the land between those two seas is Hijaz. Al-barzakh ma bayna dunya wal-akhirah. Would you know that one? Barzakh is between dunya and akhirah. أي بينهما مدة قدرها الله فهما لا يبغيان. That Allah created a barrier between these two worlds, the seen and the unseen, that they do not cross. فَإِذَا أَذِنَ اللَّهُ فِي انْقِضَاءِ الدُّنْيَا صَارَ الْبَحْرَانِ شَيْئًا وَاحِدًا. Allah, He's saying there's the unseen world and the seen world. And for now, there's what in between them? There's a barrier. But one day, Allah will decide that the barrier should not exist, and the two seas shall become one, and the unseen and the seen shall become one. You will see the jinn, you will see the angels, you will see Allah, you will see the unseen, you will see the scroll of your deeds, you will see everything that used to be unseen will become seen. So that those two oceans are about to meet. For now, la yabghiyani. And the verbal form, la yabghiyani, is also interesting. It actually means, for now, they don't cross. They're not crossing at the moment. He doesn't say they'll never cross. He just kind of made it a temporary thing. بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ. Also, the word barzakhun, because it's nakira, could suggest they have some barrier that they don't cross. Which means he's not saying absolutely no crossover happens. Some crossover can happen. You can see a dream from the angels. You can have some people may communicate with devils and shayateen. That can happen. It does happen. So that possibility still is maintained. In بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ. لَا يَبْغِيَانِ also, it means something that's desired, but actually means crossing over a limit. So we don't have to dig too deep into that. Now فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. The question is different now. It's not the same question. So what is it that we're supposed to be in awe of now? What are we supposed to wonder about now and not be in denial of? That Allah has created two realities. That Allah has separated the nations of the world by land masses. Had He not done that, can you imagine the scope of wars? Can you imagine the unleashed power? If one nation became powerful and controlled all of the seas, right? Then what would have happened what kind of destruction would have happened in the world? Actually the division of land on this planet creates the division of power between human beings. That's actually what it does. SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah. What an incredible system Allah made. Those of you that are interested in the study of history, again, I remind you, study what happened on the seas, and you'll find that what happened on the seas many a times determined what happened with the empire. When the empire started falling, when they started losing not just land mass, more importantly, when they started losing control over the seas. Many of the military exercises and posturing and tension that's happening between superpowers in the world today is not happening over land. You know that, right? It's happening over the seas. All this technology to figure out a way of getting submarines into the enemy territory. And then the naval ship showed up by the coast near, Russian naval vessels near Alaska or whatever, or the Chinese are encroaching into this landmass or that sea port or whatever other seaport. This is the game of the world now, right? So فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. What other wonders of, like Allah is holding the world together and from falling into chaos just the way that He divided the seas. يَخْرُجُ مِنْهُمَا اللُّؤْلُؤُ وَالْمَرْجَانِ. I'll give you one more and then I'll give you a break. So يَخْرُجُ, the translation of this would be pearls and coral. Lu'lu' would be pearls and coral gems would be al-marjan. That's one way to look at it. Coral pearls are like red in color. Okay? Lots to wonder about here. Notice, even now, the focus is on beauty. Right? On the earth, the focus was on beauty. And the ocean has endless treasures in it. It has seafood in it. It has trade in it. Functional things. But what did Allah decide to bring our focus and attention to in this surah? On pearls and coral, which are both symbols of what? Beauty. They're symbols of beauty. They're not necessities. They're add-ons that make life beautiful. Right? Now, yakhruju could mean that from both of those seas, lu'lu' and marjan come out. Meaning pearls and coral come out from both seas. If you think of the meaning of the unseen and the seen, remember? That would mean that pearls and coral come out of this world, but there's other pearl and other coral that comes out from where? The unseen world. And I started thinking about that. How can I know about the pearls and coral of the unseen world? And then I was like, oh yeah. كَأَمْثَالِ اللُّؤْلُؤِ الْمَكْنُونِ. Like in Jannah, the servants are being described as lu'lu', like pearls. And the spouse in this surah later on is going to be described as al-yaqut wal-marjan. كَأَنَّهُنَّ الْيَاقُوتُ But that's not a spouse in this world, that's a spouse in this world. You have these kinds of pearls and coral. That world will have its own kind of pearl and coral. يَخْرُجُ مِنْهُمَا اللُّؤْلُؤُ وَالْمَرْجَانُ Subhanallah. It's so beautiful that he does that. So it's not just about two kinds of water or two seas, but it may be the lu'lu' and marjan of this world and the lu'lu' and marjan of the unseen world, right? So he's the beauty of that world too. But there's other things here. يَخْرُجُ can be read يُخْرِجُ also. يُخْرِجُ with a dhamma. If you read it with a dhamma, it means He brings out, meaning Allah brings out lu'lu' and marjan. If you read it يَخْرُجُ, it means lu'lu' and marjan come out. They come out. If you read يُخْرَجُ, the third reading, يُخْرَجُ مِنْهُمَا اللُّؤْلُؤُ وَالْمَرْجَانُ, that actually means that the pearl and coral are brought out. So if it's brought out, meaning people bring them out. يُخْرِجُ, Allah brings it out. يَخْرُجُ, they come out. They emerge. Right? So these are the three meanings that are found inside of one ayah, depending on the reading. If you say يَخْرُجُ, then the lu'lu' and marjan will be mansoob. So يَخْرُجُ or يُخْرِجُ مِنْهُمَا اللُّؤْلُؤَ وَالْمَرْجَانَ, like the harakat would change. But the thing to ponder, this is tafsir, but let's do a little bit of tadabbur before I give you a break. Why mention these things? Okay, fine, they're beautiful. But think a little more deeply. You know what pearls are? I mean, let me see if I have a picture. This is coral. This is coral. And, oh, I forgot the pearl picture. But you know what pearls look like. Where are pearls formed? Yes, oysters. You know what pearls actually are? Oyster poop. It's actually oyster secretion. Its waste forms the pearl. One species poop is another species treasure. Literally. Do you know what coral gems are come from? These corals, they die. And then when they die, they crystallize. And they become hard. And then we use them as gems, and they say they have medicinal properties, and they clean blood, and all kinds of stuff. So one species corpse is another species treasure. The two things that are the most disgusting to human beings are feces and corpses. Feces and corpses. And these two treasures are actually feces and corpses. Allah is telling us something really profound here. Allah decided to take something that has zero value. In fact, it's at its core, it's disgusting. But He turned it into something beautiful for who? Humans. He took something that's dead and made it into a treasure. That's what Allah did. Like, what a commentary on beauty. To take something that is at the height of ugliness and turn it into something beautiful. That's what Allah did. There's another thing here for our contemplation. Human beings put value on things without realizing what the origin of those things is. You know, in the ancient times, pearls were like a show of royal power. These are status symbols, pearls and coral, because we have the kind of bling, we have the kind of money to pay for sailors to go out to sea and to dive deep and to get those pearls and then get a whole necklace made of pearls that I'm going to walk around in. Kings would wear, not just queens, kings would wear pearl necklaces and have a stash of marjan with them, because this wasn't just about beauty, this was about a symbol of show and power. You know how like people wear brands? Right? And they want to make sure that the logo sticks out on the purse, you know? And women, like some women, not you, no women in New Jersey, and their Chanel and their Louis Vuittons, right? And then when they go to some Eid gathering, they have, where's that Chanel? Where did I put it? Where did I put it? And then they have to put it next to the dinner table, like. And then they position it this way, so those people get a view. Then they position it this way, those people get a view. You know, like. You know, you have to show it off. But you see, the idea of showing it off, where did it come from? Well, I mean, at the end, think about that Chanel bag for a second. It is a dead cow, well stitched, gone through a stretching process. Well, it's a dead cow is what that is. Most of that cow became someone's burger. And then it came out the other side and fed the earth. And some of that cow, you decided to put this much value on. Right? At the end of it all, that's what it actually is. If you accidentally dropped it into left it somewhere on a farm, over a few, decades, it would disintegrate into the sand and return to what its origin is. Right? That's what would happen to it. But you know what? Allah created things that are at its core, they're actually not, in their essence, they're nothing. But we give them value. We give them value because of their beauty. And so we learn something about this life. In this life, human beings give value to what? Beauty. And then that value becomes a symbol of power. Power structures get formed with beauty. Entire societies get developed with beauty, with the attraction of beauty. You'll have, for example, a no-name town, and they'll build this huge resort, beautiful resort, and guess what happens next? People start moving to the area, other things start coming to the area. The whole ecosystem gets formed, all because of what? Because of beauty. Just because of beauty. Think about every major industry, like the phone industry, for example, technology industry, the car industry, every industry. How is it that they make their product sellable? Not by making it more functional. Actually, what really sells in the end is the look. Like the 2015 Range Rover and the 2023 Range Rover is still a Range Rover, essentially the same engine, essentially the same transmission issues, essentially the same vehicle, same tires, same rubber, same metal, same mechanics. What's different? Oh, the look though, bro. It's so sick on the inside. Different kind of cow they killed to make those leather seats. Like, it's so different. Like, human value on beauty. What is the Mona Lisa? It's a painting. In the eyes of some beholders, it's beautiful. How much value is the original Mona Lisa? Forget the Mona Lisa. How much is an NFT of a monkey with like one lens on it? It's an ugly picture, but somebody thinks it's got value. We can give anything value. Human beings give subjective value to things, and then entire worlds are impacted by that subjective value, aren't they? Entire worlds are shaped by the value we give to things. Allah is teaching us this point because the value of these things are actually only inside of our minds. The reality of it is they don't actually have value, nor do they have permanence, because we ourselves don't have permanence. We ascribed value to them. Isn't that the case? Allah put in us a desire for beauty, so we decided to put value on these things. However, there are some things that are beautiful and valuable that we didn't give the value to. Allah gave the value to them. You know what that is? That is His word. That is His guidance. The value of Allah's words did not come from us giving it value. It came from Allah giving it value. The value given, the Lu'lu' al-Marjan were made beautiful, but who decided to make them expensive? We did. We set the price for it. We made the expeditions for it. That's the difference. Allah is teaching us something about our own tendencies and how we create value. How we create value. And how Allah wants us to rethink value. Not in denial of these things, but in harmony with these things. You can still enjoy the beauty of these things, but only when you truly understand where actual value comes from. May Allah Azza wa Jal give us an appreciation of things that truly have value.